when you look at kids, especially during the summer, why not just make it these group projects and just let go of the expectation that may be a burden on a child?
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers. So, Andrew, I know we have talked about this before, and that is what to do with your students now that they're free for the summer. Should you continue doing any type of writing assignment?
Of course not. Why would you want to burden your students with maintaining their basic skills during a long 3-month holiday when they could sufficiently allow everything to atrophy and you could have to just start over in the fall?
He says with his tongue in cheek. So there are a few skills that we would recommend continuing, at least touching on, so that the kids don't get evaporation syndrome.
Yeah. Well, there's basically your knowledge, concept, your skills.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to forget stuff if you don't reinforce it periodically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way things are. I don't think that anyone ever said, 2.5 or 3 months of no academics is going to be really good for kids. That isn't how summer came to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it started out in a time when people needed kids to help them work.
Mm-hmm.
And then at this point, I think it's a combination of really entrenched tradition and the fact that it would be very hard to find people who wanted to teach in schools if they didn't have that huge benefit of a long paid time out of school.
Yeah.
So, we'll say, I don't know if you call it vacation because I know a lot of teachers who do work during that time.
Mm-hmm.
But, for kids, it's never really that helpful. And I know a lot of homeschoolers that basically do year-round school.
Yes.
And there are a few schools here and there that have shifted over to year-round school and will take 2 to 3 week breaks several times a year, which I think overall is probably better. But a lot of people, they just start going into, I'm exhausted, finished, I'm not going to do another day of this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I know some people that get to that point early April.
Well, there you go. And so even with our writing system, we kind of wind down with our Unit 9, expecting that hopefully parents and teachers will get to that in April or May. But if they don't, guess what? They get to start over again in the fall.
Yeah,
and
or
off
just
we
keep
go.
going through the summer.
That's true.
Or, I know some people maybe have their kids in school or they have them in some kind of school-like hybrid program or something, and they look at the summer as a time to really do enrichment with academics, along with travel, along with maybe, hopefully, a whole lot more time outdoors and all that. So, so what can people do to retain and even possibly build their writing skills?
Well, I like to think about the enrichment side of it because I like the idea of it being different than the school year. I like the idea of the kids at least tricking them into thinking they're getting a break. And so what kind of writing assignments would be enrichment-based writing, delight-based writing assignments? And I'm thinking, what teacher is going to come up with that type of thing? And, we had a few ideas when we talked about this before. Some of them were to start a little writing club, where you get a group of kids together and they meet maybe a couple days a week and you serve refreshments and you just make it a game and you just start with either one of our theme-based books and you just do a couple lessons over the course of the summer, and it's not a lesson a week. It's just a little bit of playing here and there and maybe elaborating a little bit more on some of the stylistic techniques.
Yeah, especially if you went and did up through Unit 3.
Yes.
And that would be, a story writing club. Most kids think they like writing stories better than reports.
Right.
Some of them know they don't, but most of them think they do until they get kind of stuck and they don't like their story, which is why our Unit 3 is so excellent.
Yep.
So, yeah, story club. I think also, the modern world is kind of pointing out to kids that a lot of people will write blog posts about what they're doing or thinking or going on with them. So, that's not something we ever really talk about, except maybe Unit 7, inventive writing. But blog posts are a lot more free form. It's not as though, okay, now you have to have X number of paragraphs with Y number of details per that. Another thing is scripts. Writing a video script.
Right. Doing a little play. Yeah.
I think a lot of kids like to make videos, but they don't necessarily have the experience or the mastery to be able to make a video spontaneously that's going to be that interesting or amusing to anybody. Right. But they could write a script and practice it up and then make a video.
Right.
And about any number of things, whether it's something they like to do, like cooking or climbing trees, and then they can write it, read it, and then take video clips and make a little, mini movie. It's going to come out better the more planning there is.
Right, right.
So we should do sometime an actual thing on script writing.
Okay.
I'm not sure I would be able to tell people how to do it, but it is kind of a different little zone of writing that could be
the
there.
Format of it would be pretty easy to find a format that you could then, that's what we do, structural models that you can then imitate. You need to paint the scene. You need to have the characters identified, who they are, what their background is a little bit. So
a lot of people travel during the summer. And, I think travel is helpful because you're seeing and hearing and experiencing things, tasting, smelling, things that you're not used to. You go to a different place, and so there's variety.
Right.
And so that makes it easier to write about because it's new and the impression on your senses is stronger than, you're in the same place day after day.
Yep.
So I think to incorporate travel.
Well, and let me just talk about that a minute because I love that idea. I love to travel personally. I think and have started traveling a little bit with my grandchildren. But even when the challenge that I had with my boys growing up is very different than today's parents with their children and traveling. And we didn't have the problem with screens. We had the coloring books, we had the conversations, we had the adventures and audio cassette tapes that we played in our car while we were traveling.
Old.
But today, there's my 5-year-old granddaughter and she's in a car or on a plane and she wants to play with the iPad or, and mom and dad say, no, let's wait until we drop grandma and grandpa off at the airport and then you can play. But how about using that travel time to actually talk about and then write what you just experienced? Now, that's a problem for me personally now. Again, this is my own personal problem, but you might find this problem in your family that I get car sick. And so for me to write in a car just does not bode well for anyone. So how about the person that might get car sick be the dictator or not the dictator, but the person
the non-car sick person can be the secretary. Yes. I suppose one of my favorite stories when this was shown to me, I was very impressed, and it was a long time ago, probably 15 years or more. But this mom who'd been teaching our program for a few years to her kids, she had these twin boys, I think they were 11 if I recall, and they went on a trip with their grandparents, and took a lot of pictures,
Mm-hmm.
as you would expect.
Yes.
And so the mom said, well, you could do kind of a Unit 5 style, but just one paragraph
Mm-hmm.
about some of the pictures you took on your trip to Arizona with
Yep.
grandparents, whatever. And, the boys had enough writing. They had the confidence and competence to do this. And so they, looked at the picture, used the Unit 5 model. What's the central fact? And then, all right, what else is going on? What were you thinking? What you're feeling? What happened before? What happened after? What was outside the picture? All that stuff. That becomes a habit of thinking if you stick with it long enough. And then, of course, a clincher that uses 2 or 3 keywords from the topic sentence. So you'd have maybe a 4 or 5, 6 maybe sentence caption.
Yes, I love
for
that.
that picture.
Mm-hmm.
And, these boys got going with this, and I don't know who thought of it, but someone thought that they could keep going with this and then make a book for the grandparents.
I love that idea.
With the pictures of the trip and the paragraph, a short little caption-y paragraph for each picture. And I think they ended up with over 50 pictures and paragraphs in a book. And I think they took the trip in the summer and they had the thing ready by Christmas.
Christmas, perfect. Love it. Yep.
That's one way that the writing can be reflective. It can be enjoyable and somewhat free. You can still practice the structure and style ideas. And it's a way of sharing and giving.
Yep. There's so many reasons why today, because I remember when I first started working with you, I had heard that story. So that's over 15 years ago that had happened. And we didn't have the technology then that we do now. And so to create a book like that would be super easy.
Yes, today. Yeah. I think they had, they did have digital camera. And so you could lay it out and put it out. But now, yes, you could just send it all in and it would be perfect bound.
Exactly.
With beautiful glossy pages. And only cost you $30 or something.
That's right. So. That's right. And you could do it either in the child's own writing, printing, or cursive, which I love that idea because then you're preserving an artifact. This is how they used to write at that age, with their own handwriting, or just have them narrate to mom or
right. If
teen.
They're too young to write it out, they can narrate. I think that what was fun was for them to work on it together. And of course, twin boys are going to be naturally a little bit competitive. So, they probably were, you do this one, I'll do this one. Or maybe they said, well, we'll do this together. And then they get to both throw in memories.
And then those ideas
I mean,
would be very silly.
One of the things I have noticed a difference between being in school and being in the real world. When kids are in school, there's kind of this context, like you have to be doing everything all by yourself. You have to write your reports all by yourself. Otherwise, you're not learning as well as you would. But, in the real world, we're constantly collaborating. We're constantly tossing ideas back and forth. We're constantly gaining the benefit of the synergy of many people's genius.
Yes.
And so when you look at kids, especially during the summer, why not just make it these group projects and just let go of the expectation that may be a burden on a child that somehow I have to go off and think of everything and do it all by myself and be, back to the world until I finish this horrible writing assignment. I mean, that just isn't representative of what we do once we finish school, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very true. I'm a very collaborative leader. I love to get input from my team, and I feel like then I'm kind of, what do you call it, double teaming you. Hey, Andrew, my team said we should do this, and how can you say no to me?
Oh no, it works well. But so there's that aspect. I have seen, and I think it's kind of going away. But I'm always grateful when I receive one which is like the Christmas letter
Yes.
from the whole family.
Yes.
And each person contributes.
Oh, so mom doesn't write the whole letter.
Yeah,
Everybody
exactly.
gets
Like
to write
each
their own.
member of the family. And some of these can get pretty long if
Yes.
there's, 5, 6, 7 kids, whatever. But why not an end of the summer letter?
I love that.
Rather than, we have to do this with the new year.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I have come to appreciate more and more are letters from kids, especially grandchildren.
Yes, yes.
And as my grandchildren getting a little bit older, I can have a little bit more enjoyment or expectation of a little bit more in depth. I mean, they love to illustrate. All the grandchildren, they would rather draw pictures, I think, than write letters. But why not both?
Sure, exactly. What is the expression you're quoting? I don't remember who you're quoting, but that which is honored is cultivated. Yes. And so I think that's probably why they enjoy drawing pictures for you, because you're honoring their efforts.
Well, and then I have to write back.
Yes, you do.
But so, that's good. What else? What are some other ideas you have thought of for summer writing? I don't know. What would you call it? Maintenance exercise, but...
Well, enrichment is kind of what I was thinking. And what you mentioned it, but just a different spin on that is writing letters and doing maybe, and we do this in the Structure and Style for Students Year 1 Level B, I believe, where you're writing a letter to a business and you're basically saying good things about their restaurant or their store, or, write a letter of complaint. So how about writing letters of affirmation to places that you have visited? And, I think that the owner of that store would just be delighted to get a letter from a 15-year-old or a 7-year-old.
Probably frame it, hang it on the wall.
And
you go there again next summer, you see your own letter up on the wall.
And maybe you got a coupon for a free chicken sandwich if you wrote a letter thanking them for their delicious chicken sandwich. So yeah, I like that idea. And the other thing that I did want to mention, and this almost sounds like bringing school into the summer, but this idea, and we talked about the writing club and only going up to Unit 3, but there are some things that we have in our curriculum that are built-in games. And I'm thinking about our Fix-It grammar. Maybe you didn't have time to address grammar over the school year. How about grabbing one of our Fix-It grammar programs and, whatever level your students are at, you just read the description. You'll be able to figure it out pretty easily. If you're not sure, just go down a level and let them have fun. And it's like a treasure hunt. Every day they're trying to find the mistakes that are embedded, and they have a little checklist and check it off. And then you can turn that into a bigger game where I'm thinking of Dr. Webster, where the students got their little avatars and they were
moving up the pathway.
Yeah, the pathway. He had planets, and that whole idea of just rewarding their efforts, but making what they're doing actually have built-in motivation as well.
Yeah. So another thing that we do a little bit of it in some of our video courses, but I think also fits very nicely with the summer theme, is poetry.
Oh, yes.
And it's a time when memorizing poetry, nature poetry, knowing poems that you can recite when you go somewhere, maybe to summer camp or to visit cousins, or something where you can kind of exercise your poetry muscles a little bit. And of course, poetry by its nature doesn't have to be quite so rigid. Like, that's one of the things we do for kind of an off checklist assignment.
Right.
Like, don't worry about, stylistic techniques per se. Try to imitate this, rhyme scheme or meter, or try to work on this theme or memorize this poetry. So, I think that that's a nice thing to incorporate.
Right.
Into summer, as well as maybe some themes that are summer-based themes. I know one that a lot of people enjoy is kind of the 4th of July, fireworks, freedom, travel, picnics, history of the country, Francis Scott Key writing the, national anthem during the War of
The
1812, stuff like
Star-Spangled Banner,
that.
yeah.
So that's a theme that would come up in July, which is not part of the normal school year per se.
Right, exactly.
And then, what are some other things kids do? Maybe they get to go swimming or take swimming lessons or picnics, or they've got more time to do cooking. Maybe summer recipe book.
Yep. Oh, I love that idea. Yep. And, sorry, I keep bringing you back to structure and style for students, but we actually did some writing lessons on these really ancient recipes of this dried shark that they serve.
Yeah.
But that was fun too, though.
Was that 2A?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, I'm thinking, what are some of those extracurricular things that you have time to do with children when they don't have to go to class? You don't feel like you have to be constantly vigilant to get to the next page in the next chapter so that you can finish the book on time. Well, now, what are the things that you're doing in life? And, I think one of, and I'm very hesitant to say this because I always had this really negative attitude about journaling.
Yes.
In this sense of, and I think the reason was my perception of journaling was that you would write down how you feel about various things.
Right, right.
And I'm a guy. I don't know how I feel about various things. And so it always just seemed like a dumb thing to me. But now that I'm older, I realize it could have just been a record of what happened.
Yeah.
And how enjoyable it is to be able to read back just a record of what happened because it activates memories.
Yep.
And so I've started a 1 sentence a day plan. I've been at it for about a year and a half. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to tell how I feel about stuff. I'm just going to say, here's what happened today. But when I look back and read, a year ago, I read it, I think, I remember that now. And I would not have remembered it if I hadn't been able to read it.
Right.
So I kind of wish I'd started this 50 years ago, when I was a kid.
Right.
And just this, anybody could do this, 1 sentence a day about anything that happened during the day. And if you wanted to do more, okay, you could do more.
Right.
But that's a very, very doable idea. And even if the kids kind of rebel and say, why do I have to? Fact is, if you just all did it together, everyone's going to write their 1 sentence about today in their book before we go to bed.
A little composition book.
Yeah, any kind of
that.
book. Or, I use a Excel spreadsheet.
There you go.
But I see more value in that now that I'm old than I would have thought it would have when I was younger. And I really wish I had more records of the things that happened in my life.
Right.
And it would be particularly cool to have access to what my children were remembering from the days of their lives back when they were kids and teenagers and all that. And, as long as it's not one, I think the thing that put me off was this diary with the lock and key.
Right.
Like, it's got to be something so special and secret and juicy that you don't want to know. Just like went to Grandpa's house, swam in the pool.
Yep.
It was fun. I mean, even if it's just super mundane.
Yep. I think that was 3 sentences. So there you go. You tripled expectations. That's awesome.
Actually, I'm not sure any of them were complete sentences, but we won't argue. But again, free form.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I would just say, just what I've been told, and I agree with myself when I say it to myself. When's the best time to plant a tree? 50 years ago. When's the second best time? Today.
Yeah.
So, that's
buy a bigger tree and plant it.
Yeah. So that actually reminds me of a gift I received from my daughter-in-law last year at Christmas, a subscription to Storyworth.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I'm just hoping no one gives me that.
Well, and so every week I get a little prompt, and the very first prompt that I got was, have you ever won anything? And, at the beginning, I'm a pretty good starter. I'm not so good. And what I force myself to do now when I get the prompt that I got this week is, who would you like to thank? And of course, what I had to start with is saying, I'd like to thank the Academy, because that's so cliche, right?
Yeah.
But then I just made a quick keyword outline so that if I decide to revisit it someday, now I can flesh that out. And every week I have a little chapter in my book, and that is gratifying. And so maybe a family Storyworth subscription that you only just do for over the summer. And every week you've got a prompt that you work on together collaboratively. And then you've got your, what did I do over the summer vacation?
I think collaboratively is the key, because it's so easy to throw a prompt at a kid, and if it doesn't catch, he's dead in the water and frustrated and hates it. But if you were to sit around and talk, and someone can be the secretary and put the keyword outline on the whiteboard, and then you write it out, that's imminently doable.
Yeah, and what the advantage of Storyworth, and why would you pay for a subscription, is if you actually finish it and do what they're asking you to do every week, you have a 52-chapter book that they will publish for you. That's part of what you get when you get the subscription. So I don't know if I'll ever
publish. I mean, they'll print it for you.
They'll print it for you. Yes, exactly. No one's going to buy it. That's for sure. But it's been really fun, especially as I reflect on my dad, and I lost him in the last year, and so just thinking about him and just my family, and just wow, Andrew, I'm sounding old because I'm reflecting on my legacy and what's that going to look like. But I think that this whole idea of delight-driven exercises, especially over the summer, I think will keep the students.
Well, I think we just have to be a little bit careful about that, because some kids will not ever reach a point of delight.
This is true.
And that doesn't mean it isn't worth doing.
Exactly.
So, yes, if it becomes delightful, side benefit. But, make a plan, try it, do it all together, and there's a chance that at some point, everyone will look back and say, oh, I'm so glad we did that.
Yeah.
There's also a chance they could say, do we really have to do it? And then you say, yeah, we're just going to.
We're just going to do it.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
And we haven't brought this up. I kind of alluded to this, but whenever you say yes to something, you have to say no to something else, right? So whenever you say yes to this idea of enriching your summer with writing assignments, you're saying no to probably a little bit of screen time, which we know that that's a win-win, because we know that can be healthy for students in their brains, in their souls, and in their bodies too.
Yeah, one other little thought I'll just throw out there, because I've heard so many stories that this was effective, and that is getting a cool calligraphy set.
Oh, nice.
A pen with the different tips and a little book on how to make different beautiful letters. I think for a lot of kids, they hit kind of this sensitive period where they think it's pretty cool to write in a beautiful way. And that can sometimes take a lot of time. And during the school year, time is your commodity. It's like we have to get all this stuff done.
Right.
But in the summer, you have more of that commodity. So, what if you did spend half an hour writing one sentence and making it look really beautiful and practicing that?
Maybe even illuminating the text, right? With a little bit of
illuminated text.
That would be really pretty. Well, I hope, listener, that it's given you at least some food for thought as you plan for a low evaporation level summer.
Well, and could we invite people to contribute ideas to our Facebook page, or to email them into us, and we'll post them? Because I think some of the very best ideas come from the people who are right there in the moment, getting the inspiration, and why not just share that? So we do every week, we post on our website this podcast, but we also
post a companion blog post. And so we'll open that up for comments on our blog post so that people can contribute their ideas of what they could do for writing assignments for the summer. I like it.
All right.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please subscribe to our podcast in iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify, or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcasts. Here you can also find show notes and relevant links from today's broadcast. One last thing, would you mind going to iTunes to rate and review our podcast? This really helps other smart, caring listeners like you find us. Thanks so much.